Last year I met with Johnny Barber and Joe Voss. The two of them worked together under Jim Storm to run Quest out of Malibu from about 1983 up until it was sold to Dave Bassman in around 85, 86. During that time, Jim Storm owned the field and he's the actual founder of Quest, and he was a gunsmith out of Malibu, California. According to Johnny and Joe, this was a rifle that he built around the time he started Quest, which would mean that it dates to around 1983 to 1984, making it one of the first custom paintball markers ever created. This marker is built from a Crosman Trapmaster 1100 rifle. The operation of this rifle as a BB shotgun would be, I believe, you open the breech up here using the cocking knob on the side, load your little capsule with BBs in it, and then you would bring it forward and then you'd be ready to shoot. It has a low power and a high power. You can adjust them by flicking this lever back and forth. It runs off two 12 grams, one facing forward, which is pierced by the front, and one that faces the valve, which is pierced by the back. It's a sealed live chamber, so it uses an O-ring at the top inside of this plug to seal the lower tube, and it uses an O-ring around the back piercer. According to Johnny Barber and Joe Voss, on high power, this would shoot around 400 feet per second, and on low power, it would shoot somewhere under 300. A couple years ago, Joe Voss's son-in-law brought this rifle along with several others into I&I Sports in Southern California to have them serviced. Nate, the manager at I&I Sports, posted photos of this rifle along with several others, including a KBS Eliminator, a Mach 1 pump twist dual, and what was possibly a Landshark onto Facebook. After Nate had posted the photos, no one was able to identify this rifle, and it sat in I&I Sports along with the other markers for several years. Last year, in November of 2017, Johnny Barber came into I&I Sports, and Nate gave me a call to go down and talk to him. When I met with Johnny Barber, we talked about his history, we talked about the Wolf Pack, we talked about Jim Storm, Dave Bassman, Quest, Conquest, and many other things. He also mentioned this rifle. When I went to see Joe Voss along with Johnny Barber a few days later, we looked around for this rifle, but we couldn't find it. His son-in-law had been renting the house for several years, and Joe thought that maybe they disappeared when his son-in-law was there. Joe gave his son-in-law a call, and his son-in-law had actually taken the markers to I&I Sports to be serviced. And the funny thing is that we had actually seen this rifle prior to that, but it had been so long since Johnny had actually seen it that he didn't realize this was the rifle he had been talking about. So to shoot this rifle, the actual process is you'll take out the lower tube plug, this rear piercer on the end here, you'll unscrew it, you'll drop one 12-gram end facing the valve, you'll drop another 12-gram end facing the piercer, and then you'll pull this lever. So I've already aired this up because the 12-gram piercer is a little tough to thread on, and I didn't want to waste time with that on the video. So it's aired up right now, and now we're going to shoot it. I have a chronograph right here, and we'll actually be able to see how the high power and low power affect the velocity. So to load paintballs into this rifle, what I'm going to do is I'm going to remove the end cap on the front of the top tube. I'm going to pour one tube in, and we're going to see how it does. The actual operation to load this rifle up is you pump it forward, and your breech will clear the bolt. The bolt is static to the actual valve. So what actually moves is your barrel, the top tube, and your pump handle. So I can go ahead and pump it forward. A ball will fall in. Now I'll pump it back, and it's loaded and ready to go. As I did that, I cocked it on the side here. This cocking knob, as I explained earlier, has to be pushed forward. So your pump action actually will do that. So I'm going to start shooting this with a lever on back pulled towards me. We're going to check the velocity on this setting, and then we're going to check the velocity on the forward setting, and we're going to see which is high power, which is low power. So we're ready to shoot. Let's see how it does. I'm going to rest it here. 330, and that's with the lever back towards me. So now I'm going to flick the lever forward. I'm going to turn around to pump it so we can actually demonstrate towards the camera. A ball falls in. Pull it back, we're locked and loaded and ready to go. So that's our low velocity. That's at 241 right there. I have had this aired up for a little while, and if there are minuscule leaks, they could actually be coming out. So with a fresh set of 12 grams, it could actually air up at a higher velocity. So I'm going to shoot it again on the low power, which is the lever forward. We're going to see how it does. 248. So let's shoot it again and see how it does on the third shot on low setting. 238 for the third shot. So now let's do some shooting and just see how it does. I'm not very good at actually getting the balls loaded in. All right, let's load another tube of paint in and let's see how it does on the high velocity. Take a tube out, pull my plug out of the end here, dump my tube in. Let's go with 2 tubes. Load it up. So now I'm going to change it to high power, just like that. So I actually have too many balls in here. They're not moving around. .343. 334. So now let's shoot it at high velocity and see if I can hit that target. And that's the end of our 12 grams. We can hear them venting. So now I'm going to take the 12 grams out. If I can turn this knob, it's on here super tight. I think I need a rubber glove to do it. But yeah, that's it. That's a Jim Storm rifle. So I just unloaded my paint, and now let's take a look at the actual pumping and cocking mechanism. And let's talk about the actual parts on it. So we can see right here we have the Trapmaster Crosman pellet gun, or BB gun. I guess it's a BB shotgun. Right here we have our back velocity adjuster. What we discovered was forward is low power and back is high power. So there's a spring right here that actually controls the hammer hitting the valve. And when you have it up, it releases some of the tension on that spring, so it strikes the valve with a lesser effect. And when you have it back, it stretches. Let's see, I guess it pivots like this. So the spring is probably hooked in here. So as it pivots back, it pulls onto that spring and you get a higher tension on that spring, which means that when you actually release the trigger, it comes back with a higher velocity and it hits the valve harder. The valve is actually right here. There's actually a hard line that goes from the lower tube right here, and it snakes around all the components that are inside the 2 shells of the Trapmaster, and it ties into the back of the valve here. I thought it would be a nightmare taking that apart, but we ended up not rebuilding the valve and just kind of avoiding that factor of it and pulling the components out, avoiding the hard line, and then when we assembled it, just putting it back in the right spot, and the valve aired up fine. It did leak a very slight amount right when we aired it up, but aside from that, it seemed to be fine, which was really surprising because it probably hasn't been shot since 1985, and that's the year I was born. So now let's look at the actual assembly that's custom on this. On a Trapmaster BB shotgun, this wood portion is static and there's a clamp up here. So the airsmith who built this rifle actually cut a portion of the pump handle off here, notched the portion here out to allow for the 68 caliber barrel. This is a steel 68 caliber barrel, and then it has a copper top tube, a copper feed tube. So the wooden handle is actually notched out, and a linkage arm was added to the side. So when we pump it forward, what happens is you have this long power tube bolt assembly. It's one piece and it doesn't move, it's static. So as we pump it forward, what happens is you pull your breech forward. Now with your breech, your barrel, your feed tube, and your pump handle pulled forward, we can see that the actual bolt power tube assembly is exposed right here. And we've slid this portion past the opening or past the end of that bolt power tube. So now, once we have it slid forward, we can rock the rifle back, a ball will fall and roll into the breech, and then we can pull the assembly backwards, just like that. So there is an O-ring on the end of this bolt assembly. I have it about half cocked and we can see that O-ring which sits about right here. And there's an O-ring on the back as well. So that actually seals off the breech area. Storm's inspiration was likely at the time in 1983, 1984, only PG pistols and nail spot bolt actions. So what he would reference would be a Nelson bolt and possibly the Sheridan bolt. I believe the earliest PG bolts had O-rings on the front. Looking at the top tube, we can see we have a removable feed plug that's held in with an O-ring. We have a shotgun pin sight, which is actually, I believe, soldered onto the top of the copper. And then we have a nail spot back cap, which we can see right there. There's also a screw going through the back of the feed tube, which will prevent balls from falling beyond the actual opening of the breech. So that's pretty much it on the Crosman Trapmaster 1100 rifle that was built by Jim Storm, owner and operator of Quest in Malibu, California. If this rifle actually dates back to 1983, 1984, that would make it one of the first custom paintball markers. And really, that would make it one of the first paintball markers. Because at the time, you would have the nail spot 007, you would have the PG pistol, and that's about it. You wouldn't even have the second generation of paintball markers, which would be the long barrel K rifle. You wouldn't have the Trapmaster, which introduced in maybe late 84, 85. You wouldn't have the South Bay Arms, Aaron Carter, Stan Russell, Tim McMurray elevator Master Blaster pistol. You wouldn't have any of those. You would really only have the nail spot and the PG. So this is really just a remarkable piece of paintball history.